Last week, I introduced you to Sarah, the art teacher who had tried 6 different budgeting systems over 10 years and was starting to believe that the problem was her. We talked about why budgets really fail for creative, right-brained people, not because of willpower or discipline or intelligence, but because of fit and brain readiness. We talked about the stories that people carry about themselves and money and how those stories and beliefs quietly run the show until you actually take the time to stop and examine them. If you haven't heard that episode, please go back and listen to that one before you go through this one, because what I'm about to share works best when that foundation is already in place. Because today, we are gonna get practical. We're gonna go through every step you need to take to truly build a budgeting habit that will lead you to lasting, meaningful change, especially for those creative, Type B, right brain type thinkers. I'm Tammy Kayata. I'm a certified financial planner professional, and I spent 15 years helping over 6,000 people completely transform their financial lives at a Fortune 100 company. And I saw up close every version of this story. I know what works, I know what the industry will not tell you, and now that I'm out on my own, I'm finally free to share all of it with you. No jargon, no watered down advice, no sponsor telling me what I can and can't say, and no false promises. This is Off the Record, where ordinary people build extraordinary wealth. Today I'm going to talk you through a 3-step framework that I've developed over nearly 2 decades of working with real people with real money. This isn't a framework that I borrowed from a textbook somewhere. It's one that I built over those decades of working with thousands of people and watching some succeed and some fail and figuring out what the difference is, what works and what doesn't. And here's what I discovered. There's a 3-step framework with step 1, mindful spending, step 2, broad-based budgeting, and step 3, full budgeting. Now, you don't start at step 3, which is what most budgeting tools and financial advisors tell you to do. You start at step 1 and you move forward when you're ready, not when anybody else tells you to. Let's dig a little bit deeper into each one of those steps. Step 1, mindful spending. I'm going to say something that might sound counterintuitive coming from a financial planner. The first step has nothing to do with numbers. Nothing. No spreadsheets, no categories, no tracking, not a single transaction log. And here's why. When most people try to build a budgeting habit, they're actually doing it completely backwards. They go straight to the mechanics of budgeting, the apps, the categories, without ever establishing the reason that the budget exists in the first place. And when the mechanics get hard, and they always do, especially when you're getting started, there's nothing underneath to hold that habit together, so it falls apart. What I did with Sarah, before we looked at a single number, was this. I asked her what she actually wanted her life to look like. Not her financial life, her overall life. I asked her, where do you want to live? How do you want to spend your time? What does your day look like? What experiences do you want to have? What would you regret not doing? When you imagine having enough money, truly enough, what does that actually look like? And then I got more specific. I pushed her to be more detailed across 3 time horizons. Short term, what do you want life to look like in the next 3 years? Intermediate, how about that 3 to 10 year time frame? And long term, what does the back half of your life look like in your ideal version? Now here's why those 3 time horizons matter. Most people, when they finally let themselves dream about money, they jump straight to the long-term vision, financial freedom, retirement, the life that they want to build someday. And that vision is important, but you also have to live your life right now. Your budget needs to reflect both. Because if the only thing that your budget is actually working toward is a retirement that's 20, 30, 40 years away, then every spending decision in the present feels like pure sacrifice for the future. And without visible payoff, that sacrifice is a motivation killer. When Sarah started answering these questions, something happened that I've seen many times, but I still find incredible. She got very emotional. She started talking about something that she'd been quietly carrying for years, but hadn't really ever verbalized. A dream of taking a sabbatical year, a year to just paint, slow down a little with her teaching, and spend her time bringing her own ideas to life on canvas. Long term, she imagined a small shop near the coast with her own work on the walls, a life that looked nothing like what she was living right now. And here's what I noticed as she was sharing this with me. She didn't actually have a budgeting problem. She had a connection problem. She had never once linked her daily spending decisions to those dreams. They existed in completely separate compartments in her mind. The dreams were over here, beautiful and untouchable, but the budget was over here, full of restriction and guilt. The moment that those two things connect, the moment you can look at a spending decision and see how it either moves you toward or away from something you deeply care about, everything shifts. Which brings us to the actual practice of mindful spending. Here's all that it involves. For the next 7 days, I don't want you to change a single thing about how you spend. Nothing. Don't cut expenses, don't create any categories, don't track anything. Just do this. Every single time money leaves your hands, pause for 2 seconds and ask yourself one question. Does this transaction align with what I said that I wanted? That's it. Yes or no. No justifications, no negotiations with yourself, just honest awareness. Because here's where it gets interesting. When you start doing this, 2 things happen almost immediately. First, you start noticing purchases that genuinely reflect your priorities. And when you do, something counterintuitive happens. You feel good spending that money. Not guilty, not anxious, good. Because it's a conscious choice instead of a default habit. That's a completely different emotional experience. Second, you start noticing spending that doesn't reflect what you said you wanted. And instead of feeling deprived when you pull back from it, you start feeling something else, relief. Because saying no to a $60 dinner that you didn't really want starts to feel like saying yes to the sabbatical that does. That's the reframe that changes budgeting entirely for people like Sarah. It stops being about restriction or saying no, and it becomes about choosing. And choosing feels powerful in a way that restricting never does. Here's a side effect of this practice that almost nobody talks about. Mindful spending has a way of surfacing the exact stories and beliefs we talked about last week. Because in that 2-second pause, a thought appears. Usually the same thoughts that have been running on autopilot for years. I work hard. I deserve this. It's only $20. What's the point? Something always comes up anyway. I'll start being careful with my money next month. For the first time, you catch those money beliefs in real time. And once you catch them, you can ask, is this actually true? Or is this just an old story doing what old stories do? Every time you catch one of those thoughts and make a different choice, you're building something more valuable than a budget. You're building evidence. Evidence that the past does not have to dictate your future. Evidence that you can do this. Evidence that slowly, quietly rewrites your identity. These aren't false affirmations or wishful thinking. These are actual decisions made differently, stacking up over time. Something I genuinely love about this approach is that after a few weeks of practicing mindful spending, something else almost always happens. People get curious. They start wondering, how much am I actually spending? Where is it actually going? How much faster could I reach these goals if I got a little bit more intentional? And that curiosity is the most important thing in the world, because now they want a little bit more structure. Not because someone told them that they should, but because internally they want it. That's the moment that you're ready for step 2. Step 2 is the 50-30-20 method. At this point, you've done something most people skip entirely. You know what you're building toward. You've started paying attention. You've started connecting your daily decisions to your actual goals. And you've built at least a little bit of evidence that you are capable of managing your money effectively and making your dream life come true. Now we add a small amount of structure. Not a lot, just enough to get started. I call this broad-based budgeting, and the framework I use most often is the 50-30-20 method, although you can tweak it for your personal situation. You've probably heard of this strategy. It's very popular, but I don't think a lot of people understand why it works. The financial industry usually teaches this as a pure math formula, but I think its real power is psychological. So here's the breakdown. 50% of your take-home pay, not your gross salary, the actual number that hits your bank account each month, goes to needs. Housing, groceries, utilities, transportation, insurance, minimum debt payments, the things that keep your life functioning. 30% goes to wants, restaurants, entertainment, travel, hobbies, the things that make your life fun, enjoyable, rather than just surviving it. And 20% goes to your future, your emergency fund, your retirement, investments, extra debt payments, saving for other goals. That's the portion of your income that's working for future you. 3 categories. That's it. Now, before somebody jumps in right away and says, oh, not going to work for me, housing alone is 60% of my income where I live, I know. These percentages are guideposts, not laws. The goal isn't to hit these numbers perfectly. The goal is awareness. Here's why this works so well for people who have struggled with traditional budgeting. Traditional budgeting often asks you to monitor 20, 30, 40, 50 different categories. Dining out, coffee, gas, haircuts, clothing, gifts, medical copays, on and on and on. For some people, that is genuinely satisfying. But for others, honestly, for most of the people that I've worked with, it's enough to make them quit budgeting before they ever start. But 3 categories, most people can manage 3. Here's what this looked like in practice with Sarah. First, we figured out her actual take-home pay, not her salary, the number that actually landed in her bank account each month. Then we did the math and calculated what 50, 30, 20 would look like for her. Then, and this is the part that surprised her, we didn't look at every single transaction. We didn't categorize 6 months of bank statements. We didn't build any complex spreadsheets. We printed out the statements, we went next to the transactions, the bigger ones, and we labeled them need, want, future. But then we said roughly, where is your money going? Big picture, ballpark numbers, that's it. What we found was interesting. Her needs were actually in reasonable shape. Her wants were much higher than she realized, and her savings rate was sitting around 5%. Now, the mistake that most people make at this exact moment is they see that gap and they want to fix everything immediately. They immediately want to jump their savings from 5 to 20% tomorrow. They look at their spending and they say everything needs to come down across the board. Cancel every subscription. We're going to get off the grid with our internet and our streaming services. We are going to cancel all vacations and not buy any more gifts. All of those strategies, it's just too much. You get overwhelmed, and overwhelm is not a strategy. Sarah didn't need to get to 20% savings by next month. She needed to get to 10% over the next year. One reasonable target, one improvement, one win. As we were going through things, we found something almost kind of funny though. She found a handful of subscriptions she'd actually forgotten about, streaming service that she wasn't even using, and apps that were charging her that she thought she canceled. We cleaned them up, and suddenly, without any dramatic sacrifice or reduction of her happiness, she had made progress. Not life-changing progress, but progress. Something I need you to understand about progress is that financial success is rarely built through massive dramatic changes. Almost never, actually. It's built through dozens of small decisions that compound over time. A little bit more saved, a little bit less wasted, a little bit more intentional. Repeat that consistently over years. That's how you win the game. The 50-30-20 method gives you visibility without overwhelming you. You start seeing where the money actually goes. You start catching patterns and you start building confidence. And confidence creates momentum. Now, something interesting happens for a lot of people at this stage. They stop here. And honestly, that might be exactly right for them. If the 50-30-20 framework helps you save consistently, avoid getting more credit card debt, build an emergency fund, invest for retirement, and make progress towards your other financial goals so that one day they will come true for you, then you may never need any more complicated budgeting strategy than this. I genuinely mean that. Some people spend years trying to get to the next step and build that perfect budget when a solid 50-30-20 budget would have solved the problem just fine. But for others, something shifts inside of them again. Once they start seeing real progress, once they start believing, hey, I can actually do this, they want more detail, more precision, more control. And that's when they're ready for step 3. Step 3 is full budgeting. This is the method most people think that they're supposed to start with. That full detailed budgeting with specific categories, specific spending targets, regular reviews, intentional adjustments every month. This is what most people picture when they actually hear the word budget. But I want to be completely clear. I love this method, I use it myself, and many of my most financially successful clients use it. But we don't start here. The problem isn't the method. The problem is thinking that we all start here, even if our brains aren't ready. Think back to Sarah at our very first meeting. If I had handed her a detailed budget with 20 categories, weekly tracking, monthly reviews, transaction level visibility on day 1, she would have done it, probably, for about 3 weeks, maybe 6, if she was feeling particularly motivated. And then we would have been back at attempt number 7 on the failure list. Not because she couldn't do it, she definitely could do it, but because she wasn't ready and it wasn't a good fit for her at that time. So here's the difference. By the time Sarah and I had moved into detailed budgeting, about 10 months into our work together, she had already done something that most people never do before they try to do full budgeting. She had changed the story and the beliefs she was telling herself about money and her own abilities. She had connected her finances to goals that genuinely lit her up inside. She had months of mindful spending practice already behind her, months of making conscious choices instead of running on autopilot. She had built real confidence through the 50-30-20 framework. And most importantly, she had evidence. Not hope, not motivation, evidence, proof, accumulated decision by decision that she could actually do this. Think about how different these two statements feel. I hope I can manage my money well, versus I've been managing money well for 8 months now. One is a wish, the other is an identity. And identities drive behavior in a way that wishes never can. The detailed budget didn't build Sarah's financial success. It extended it. It was the next tool, not her foundation. Here's what detailed budgeting actually looks like in practice, because I think people imagine that it's far more complicated than it needs to be. Sarah used a simple budgeting spreadsheet that I built with her. Had about 20 categories, 15 minutes of check-in each week, 30 minutes at the end of each month to review and adjust. Now, some people would take longer than that if their lives are more complex, but for her, that's it. No financial gymnastics, no Sunday afternoons lost to transaction reconciliation, just enough structure to support her goals that she cared about. And the results? Last time we spoke, Sarah was saving 15% for retirement, up from 5%. She had a fully funded 6-month emergency fund for the first time in her life, and that sabbatical, the one that had lived in her imagination for years, it had a timeline, a savings target, a plan. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. I want you to notice something about that. None of it happened because she found the perfect budgeting app or budgeting tool. None of it happened because she suddenly became a numbers person. None of it happened because she developed some superpower of discipline and willpower that she didn't have before. It happened because she stopped trying to skip steps. She met herself where she actually was, not where she thought she should be. She built confidence, she built skills, and then she built momentum. And eventually she arrived at a system that worked. Before we close, I want to say something directly. If you've been listening to these 2 episodes, there's a good chance that you've tried to budget before and failed, maybe more than once like Sarah. And somewhere in that history, you might have started to wonder if you're just not cut out for this, if you just could not do this. But I need you to hear me. A failed budgeting strategy is not who you are. It says nothing about your character. It's just information. It tells you something about what didn't fit for you and about where your brain was at that time. It told you about what approach that you should try differently. It tells you nothing about your worth or your skills or your value. It tells you nothing about what's possible for you going forward. The people that I've watched build real financial success over the years, they're not always the smartest. They're not always the highest earners. They're not always the most disciplined. They're the people who keep adjusting until they find an approach they can actually sustain. That's it. That's the whole secret. They stop trying to force themselves into someone else's system and they start building one that works for them. They do both the internal and the external work that is necessary to build true financial freedom. So here's where I want to leave you. Wherever you are right now, whether you're doing the mindset work from last week or you're ready to try mindful spending, maybe you're going to jump into the 50-30-20 method as your next step, or maybe you're ready to build out that full detailed budget, start there. Not where some influencer, even me, tells you that you should be. Not where your accountant says you should be. Not where your most financially organized friend is. Where you are right now. There's no prize for starting at the hardest level. There's only progress. And here's the thing about progress that almost everybody forgets. It compounds. It grows just like money does. One better decision, one better habit, one better month, and then another, until one day you look up and realize you are living the financial life that used to feel completely out of reach. It happened for Sarah, and it can happen for you. Not because you changed everything overnight, but because you kept moving. Your one action item from today, go back to the question from last week. What do I actually want my money to do for me? And this time, write down one specific thing, not a category, not a concept, a specific, concrete, emotionally alive thing that you want to build. That's your anchor. That's what the budget is for. Everything else is just the tool to get you there. And remember, financial success isn't about becoming somebody else. It's about becoming the best version of who you already are. I'll see you in the next episode. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep building the life you